An 80-year-old man became too intriguing and was tasked with spying in the senior living community. Recently, private investigator Julie was being chased by elderly women in a wealthy senior living community. She received a special request about an elderly woman who fired a cannon in the upscale senior living community. The elderly woman's son came to the scene and asked Julie to investigate. However, the senior living community was a restricted area that the general public couldn't enter. Therefore, Julie prepared an astonishing plan to infiltrate the place with an elderly spy. She decided to have him sneak in to find out who mixed up those valuable belongings, and to investigate why it had to be a man. The gender ratio at the place was 1 to 6, making men preferred. Charlie, who has been single for many years, maintained contact with his only daughter very classically, without using phone or internet. By sending letters, which mainly discussed nutrition and also included recipe ideas, movie reviews, or snippets of clipped news. In her daughter's eyes, after her mother passed away, her father took just 1 day to gather all of her belongings. It took him only 1 day to collect them in the garage. Since then, her father has become a strange old bachelor. To help Charlie adapt to the community, she tried to convince him to find some work. So I will give my father a task to find something to do or a hobby that interests him. That would be nice. Charlie agreed with his daughter's words and quickly took action. There was an ad in the newspaper for seniors, so he decided to apply just to give it a try. Julie was fed up with hiring staff. This was because most seniors couldn't even send a message, but Charlie was completely different. He had no problem taking pictures and handled the phone well. He could speak fluently, and as a retired university professor of technology, he could truly be regarded as a classic gentleman. Julie quickly decided that this task should be taken on by none other than Charlie. I will provide him with numerous recording devices. After that, he will become my subordinate. Within a month, Charlie will successfully retire and may be able to emerge as an informant for finding information on the misplaced clues. He may be able to get out of the senior living community. Before taking on the mission, Julie gave him some training. For example, how to use the spyglass. These glasses are equipped with a camera that records everything seen and hidden earphones for direct communication. After completing the basic training course, his boss, Julie, disguised as his daughter Emily, placed him into the senior living community. The conditions of the senior living community are very good. There is a library, gym, and cinema available. There are various classes and recreational activities for the elderly. Charlie's room is very spacious and bright. You can also have pets, which is even more helpful for people who have difficulty moving. There is 24-hour specialized staff for people suffering from Alzheimer's disease. There are special rooms where care is provided, but no matter how good the conditions, Charlie does not like this senior living community. Are there any elderly people who actually like senior homes? The director of the senior living community promised him many times that he would receive good care. Charlie understood that he had to come in here and fulfill his mission. But in the end, he hesitated, wanting to think about it for a day. Julie was a bit angry, but Charlie had his own reasons. For this, his wife suffered from dementia before she passed away, and he promised to support her at home until the last moment. He felt very reluctant about going into a senior living community, so now he is facing the senior living community, and memories of his wife and her death are coming back to his mind again. I'm sorry, I don't know if I can handle this. Julie decided to focus on work rather than getting bogged down by unnecessary emotions. Charlie felt it was better and, after thinking it over all night, he was convinced the next day. He moved into the senior living community and, as soon as he began his infiltration plan, he faced his first test, which was when his daughter called to ask about his living situation. Charlie could only lie to his daughter, saying he was taking a course in a San Francisco retirement community. He couldn't do anything else. Once he dealt with his daughter, Charlie began investigating the suspicious people in the senior living community. The most suspicious was the young black staff member, Jalen. He was the driver for the senior living community and was always surrounded by elderly people. Charlie didn't know anyone and couldn't determine who was more suspicious. He couldn't figure it out, so he decided to blend in by mingling with the elderly women. He tried to talk to them, but they thought he was selling insurance. Charlie, feeling overwhelmed, took a painful blow and couldn't blend in at all. Fortunately, the committee chair noticed him and eagerly tried to befriend him. The black woman, Florence, found 2 women trying to do just that. One of them was named Virginia. They invited Charlie to join them for a meal. They introduced him to the beautiful dining hall staff, Jalen. His daughter, Emily, faced great misfortune. That afternoon, she received a call about her mischievous three sons wanting to play on the trampoline. As a result, they jumped from the trampoline and all landed on the ground, each of them fracturing bones, which was quite the contrast to Charlie's unfortunate day. He was becoming more comfortable in the retirement home, like a fish out of water. He met 3 new elderly women, one of whom was named Beverly. Another beautiful woman is Peggy, who uses a heavy cane. An elderly woman named Tia once worked in a theater and fervently gave him a prop used in a particular movie. She eagerly gifted him a prop used in that film here. There were more elderly women than elderly gentlemen. Originally, there was an elderly gentleman who wanted to form an alliance with Charlie. There was an elderly gentleman who wanted to, but Charlie had no interest in the circle of elderly women. He was like a butterfly lost in a flower garden, and all the elderly women were enamored with him. The elderly women were captivated by him, and within that circle, he drank and got drunk. Julie, who had even been smoking marijuana, found out about it. At that moment, her face was darker than thawed ice, as she looked at Charlie. "What does it mean to keep a secret, Charlie?" she asked seriously. "I started looking for a way to contact Helen, who had lost her property. Because she had lost something important, Helen became very suspicious. Charlie tried to get too close in a strange and overly direct way. Helen triggered the alarm, and as a result, Charlie was called to Diddy's office. However, Diddy didn't blame Charlie. Recently, Helen had been making a fuss about not being able to find her things and was on edge towards everyone. He thought that for safety, Charlie should not approach Helen. So Charlie was relieved that he shouldn't get too close to Helen. However, Charlie was also curious as to why Diddy was so calm about the incident involving Helen's misplaced items. Diddy was pondering why he seemed so calm about it. This was an elderly resident situation. It's very common in the home, and no one steals things. They said that doesn't happen, but the elderly men and women are forgetful. Swa's true that they often lose things, perhaps dropped in a gap in the woods or in someone else's pocket. They might have dropped them themselves, they may find them someday. Charlie didn't think everything was so simple. He thought deeply and found the suspicious one to be the very irritable elderly woman who was admitted yesterday for special care. He felt it was the old woman, but when he turned around, Charlie quickly saw her. He looked at her home. This old woman had died, making her the only suspect. She had died, and the case hit a dead end once again, and when Charlie returned to the room, he found a note on the door saying not to interfere. Could it be that his status as an informant was exposed, or did the thief figure out that he was a hidden mole? Just then, Charlie was confused when yesterday, the white Virginia who completely captivated him. Charlie, who was invited to dinner by the elderly woman, had to say at the dinner table that his wife had passed away but he still loved her, so he couldn't accept anyone else. He had no choice but to tell her that. The elderly woman was very understanding as she had also lost her husband. So she understood this feeling. Therefore, I understand. It's okay, I'm not disappointed. It's also very nice if the two of them don't become a couple and just remain friends. However, in the evening, Emily's daughter sadly called Charlie to inform him that on the same day, 3 of her grandchildren had broken bones. This news devastated his daughter and made her doubt whether she was a good mother. He comforted her by telling her an incident from her childhood. He said that adolescence is often mischievous, and whether parents often do it or not doesn't matter. Surely, they must do silly things. Because children are all foolish, and the simplest answers often. After comforting Emily's daughter, Charlie went to meet Elliot. Because he had sniffed chicken on the paper. The senior living community had few men, and it was becoming increasingly rare for elderly residents to smoke. When he inquired a bit, he found that Elliot spoke the truth. He liked an elderly woman named Virginia, and saw Charlie as a rival. He warned him not to interfere in his relationship with Virginia. To win against Charlie, the elderly Elliot boasted about the honorary $579 Virginia cloth that was given to him. Charlie just thought it was funny. But just then, 2 elderly men continued their quarrel. Suddenly, a young black driver burst into Elliot's room. Can employees just enter someone else's room freely? They could if they knew them. Charlie thought the paper was just a joke. After confirming it was indeed the case, I reluctantly had to leave. And if Charlie's identity remained undiscovered, Julie felt relieved. Charlie suggested shifting the investigation towards the employees. Perhaps someone on the staff might have directly entered Helen's room and mixed up her belongings. They had the capability, so Julie thought it made sense. Charlie praised Charlie. He hadn't been complimented at work in a while. So when he was suddenly praised, he reaffirmed his position and felt an indescribable sense of achievement. 3 days later, the elderly residents held their usual residences committee meeting. They were able to point out issues they felt needed improvement in the senior living community. During the meeting, Mr. Elliot suddenly interrupted. He said, "My clock has been mixed up." Charlie could hardly believe it and wondered how he could have mixed up a clock. However, before this story could be explained, another troublesome matter arose. Emily, Charlie's real daughter, has come back to the senior living community. In fact, she tracked her father's phone's location to get there. Last night, Charlie mentioned his broken gardening tools. So she wanted to surprise him with a new set. She never expected to face another surprise the moment she opened the door. The registration documents at the senior living community had Julie using Emily's name. She had filled it out as Charlie's daughter, which meant that when Emily actually came to visit Charlie, Lily also came to see what had happened. Fortunately, Emily continued to collaborate with Charlie and Julie. They worked together to keep up the act, so she introduced herself as Charlie's Julie, and the two managed not to be found out on the spot. Charlie persuaded Emily to wait until Lily was out before agreeing to continue this investigation game, and even tried to get her to agree to it. He voiced his suspicion that if he could find the staff who were present during the time Elliot and Mrs. Helen misplaced their belongings, and if their movements matched, that person would likely be the thief. If he could find a staff member who was there, and their movement paths matched, then that person would have a high chance of being the thief. Emily recalled that during her visit to the senior living community, Lily had mentioned that all the staff at the retirement home had specific roles and a work schedule. She remembered this, as it seemed these details were all organized in some office. She immediately informed her father, and Charlie suggested that Emily go pick them up. She, being young, can move quickly, and Charlie can keep an eye on her. Because he can watch over her, the father and daughter worked together. They managed to obtain the work assignment chart and the duty schedule. The most suspicious person in this work assignment chart is the driver, Jalen, as he takes Mrs. Helen to the hospital every Thursday, giving him access to her room. Before that, Jalen directly entered Elliot's room. Mr. Kumbach had a very good relationship with Jalen, and they often enjoyed playing Western chess together. Charlie decided to investigate Kumbach himself. Emily decided to inquire about him and ask the other elderly women to see if they could find any clues. All the elderly women had a good impression of Jalen, because he was eager to help people. It was because of that, and he stubbornly refused to accept money from the fathers of the elderly women. Emily didn't gain anything from not accepting it, but instead, she gained new information. Her father, who gained the information, had gotten all the elderly women drunk on his first day in the senior living community. He got them drunk and even smoked marijuana. Now, facing her daughter's vigorous questions, Charlie could only assure her that everything was still under control. That was all he could do, but in that moment, a voice rang out, "Hey you! Get away from my wife. Who are you?" This drama made Emily's eyes go wide. Charlie had to explain over and over again, but Emily still couldn't accept it. Emily couldn't accept it yet. She went home, and then when she returned home, she calmed down and remembered that previously her father had lived alone at home, isolated from everyone. However, now her father was playing with the elderly women, having a little drink, and smoking marijuana. And there was absolutely no problem with that. In the end, Emily called to reconcile with her father. "I told him that as long as he's having fun, that's what matters." Also, Emily said to Charlie that Jalen couldn't possibly be the one mixing up belongings. Everyone thought highly of him. Moreover, he refused tips, so he didn't seem like someone in need of money. Charlie had no choice but to continue observing the staff. After observing for a certain period, all the staff at the senior living community were cleared of suspicion. The only one left was the newly arrived general manager, Beatrice Baker. This woman really liked to flaunt her wealth. However, it seemed she didn't actually live in the senior living community. Yet the salary from the retirement home couldn't cover the jewelry and luxuries she was wearing. Charlie tried to approach her intentionally to ask questions, but Beatrice quickly noticed Charlie. Apparently, she was aware of his unique skills. "It seems that when I asked more closely, I found out that the museum where his wife works is established by Beatrice's family." At this point, Charlie recognized that Beatrice's last name is Baker, and she is from one of the wealthiest and most famous families in America. Her ancestors did not only invent the train, but Beatrice also works here as a volunteer without pay. He is the kind of person who would spend his own money to come to work, so there is no way such a person could be a thief. The suspicions against all the staff were cleared, and the case returned to its starting point. The most likely suspects for stealing the jewels are the residents of the facility. With no leads, Charlie decided to take Julie's advice and infiltrate the residents' circle. He does not participate in activities, but he is building good relationships with everyone. As a result, he quickly became loved by all the elderly residents in the facility, and even became the vice chairman of the residents' committee. There was a time when he was elected with high votes, and his relationship with Mr. Kumbach also improved. It became increasingly good, and Kumbach introduced him as his son. He is just a cook, but his son is very successful and currently a senior architect at a big corporation. He is a senior architect, but the two elderly men did not understand what a big corporation is. They did not understand what a senior architect is either. Anyway, Kumbach's son. His son is very busy, so it's not easy for him to visit. He sent an expensive shaving set and hurried back to overtime. Suckly. After observing for a while, he found a new suspicious target, which was an elderly black woman named Florence, who enjoys reciting death and is an enthusiastic NBA fan. She is also a fan. However, these are not important. What matters is that Florence has a fixed time for going out. It is clearly recorded that she has no other relatives, but it is stated that she goes out to eat with her cousin. It says, Suckley once saw her dining with a man. He found it and immediately reported this information to Julie, who also thought this lead was worth pursuing. So they had an acquaintance, a female police officer, secretly investigate the man. The investigation revealed that there was indeed a problem. This man was a gambling broker specializing in helping gamblers. If Florence was a gambler, it made a lot of sense for her to misplace belongings. Therefore, that night, Sackley observed Florence and noticed she was not doing well. Sackley approached her and asked if something was wrong. She didn't suspect Sackley at all and shared her gambling stories with him. However, in reality, Florence only bet $10. She was using this method too. Remember her husband, who had gambled with this broker before she passed. She was using this method. However, now the gambling broker has become a police. Feeling monitored, he refused to accept any bets. That man is the last link between her and me. Hearing that made Sackley very uncomfortable. He felt deeply uncomfortable. He was hurting Florence and deceiving the elderly men he considered close friends. He felt he was deceiving the elderly men he considered heartfelt friends. This lead was cut off, leaving Sackley with no other options. Julie came up with a new idea, which was to draw the snake out of its hole. The next day, she made an excuse to send a watch as a birthday present for Sackley. Oh look, it's a Rolex. The two were being watched. After finishing setting up the camera, someone looked to see if anything had been tampered with. They intentionally went out for a meal, but when the two returned, they found that on the table. They noticed that the clock had not been tampered with. Additionally, by the door, there was another clock, the one that Elliot had lost, not belonging to anyone else. It was indeed the clock he had mentioned. The person seemed to have anticipated their actions. It appeared that he was trying to use this method to trap them, monitoring. When reviewing the camera again, it became clear that the individual was concealed from the camera's view. They hadn't fully entered, so Julie inadvertently felt relieved. This was clearly a professional tactic. They hid from the camera and left a fake in place of the genuine. Rolex then sent a message to him using Elliot's watch, without being noticed by Sackley. Julie suggested placing the clock in a location where the cleaning staff could find it, and observed secretly. The next day, the cleaning staff found the clock and reported it to Captain Diddy. Diddy handed the watch back to Elliot, who was smoking. He thought he had misplaced it, but Elliot started to suspect that a cleaner might have mixed things up. Scared, Sackley returned it, wanting to look for Greta, who was waiting to pick him up. He wanted to ask if someone had entered his room and was trying to elaborate. It became clear that this Greta was quite confused. Being knowledgeable, he told Sackley that Greta's condition was nothing new. She conveyed that, as a result, she is being avoided by the other residents. People began to avoid her as soon as he approached the memory care area. They seemed to think it could be contagious. They seemed to believe it might be contagious, and in the retirement home, sick elderly people are not uncommon. Elliot had previously battled cancer, and now it had returned. However, Aunt Florence and Virginia are still quite lively. The elderly women were discussing buying a gift for Sackley. Virginia was wondering what kind of gift Florence, who is black, would want. Florence, who was curious about it, had always wanted a massage chair. However, she always hesitated to spend money and couldn't buy one at her age. Now that she was at this age, not using it felt like a real waste, so Virginia decided to pull out Sackley to buy that massage chair for Florence. Sackley wanted to do something for Greta, who had dementia, for example, buying tickets to her favorite movie and going together to help retrieve her memories. However, the retirement home did not allow elderly residents with dementia to go outside for safety reasons. Sackley could only watch people while celebrating his own birthday. Meanwhile, Greta could only sit alone with a sad expression. He felt uncomfortable in his heart and decided to take a walk outside. Just then, he noticed Elliot smoking in the corner. Elliot was so used to this that he didn't care. He himself was battling ear cancer. For the elderly man, who was suffering but didn't pay much attention to it. Death wasn't a distant story, it was a problem that could arise at any time, and he was already accustomed to it. There are things that cannot be solved, and the more he thought about it, the more guilt he felt. Elliot said he could quickly stop sinking into that guilt, and he returned to the birthday party. Once back, he calmly said he could endure if it meant being by Sackley's side. He said it was okay if he wanted to be there. After all, Sackley seemed like a good person. Because he seemed like a good person, Virginia realized something was off the moment she heard, "Hey, Elliot, what's wrong? What did the doctor say?" She noticed he was not quite himself. Virginia, the elderly woman, felt as if there wasn't much time left, and she was preparing to cherish every moment. She even directly proposed to Elliot, trying to catch up with the present. "Do you want to remarry me for that?" "No way." Jaden, the elderly woman, who seemed ordinary, was flabbergasted. The elderly woman, Greta, who developed dementia, had ear cancer before Elliot did. The old woman's death came too suddenly, leaving everyone with a heavy heart. Greta's condition is also worsening. Diddy is preparing to move Greta from her regular room to a special room for 24-hour care. This made Sackley feel the brevity of life and think that he must do something meaningful. For that reason, early on a weekend morning, Diddy went to his daughter's house and spent a fun day with his grandchildren. Diddy's dedication was rewarded. The general manager saw her as a talented asset and wanted to promote her. There, the income would be higher and the working hours more comfortable. She has been working in the community for 12 years, but she might not want to relieve her stress. However, Diddy did not seem very happy. Sackley had just spent a wonderful weekend with his grandchildren. The whole family knows he is mourning the death of his friend, but only Emily did not know. After spending a wonderful weekend with his grandchildren, the whole family knows he is grieving the death of his friend, but only Emily was unaware. Emily was the only one who didn't know that they were grieving. She listened to her sons talk about their grandfather's sad story. Suddenly, she wondered why he would share his sad thoughts with others but not with his own daughter. This thought pained her, as what she meant was that she wanted him to tell her how he felt when he faced sadness. She wanted him to share what he felt during those times. However, the grandfather had his reasons. He didn't want to become a burden on his daughter since she was so busy. The last thing he wanted was to be a burden to his daughter. These words were very polite, yet Emily argued with her father. However, the two eventually revealed everything, and their father-child bond grew deeper. In the new week, the senior living community will hold Florence's funeral, and Diddy is here as well. The elderly residents are so attached to her that they have resolved not to leave the senior living community. They made this decision as it has been 30 days with no sign of her daughter, and Helen's son feels very dissatisfied as an employer regarding the matter of the contract. "I'm preparing to report this to the police. The mission at the retirement home is also coming to an end. I'm ready to leave the retirement home." The next day, he decided to go out with a new friend he met at the retirement home. He decided to go out with his friend, an elderly black man named Kumbak. Kumbak took the company car from his son to take the two of them out. Kumbak's son is an employee at a large corporation, so his job is very stable and extremely busy. Additionally, he frequently transfers around the world for business trips. Kumbak lives in various senior living communities to be close to his son. Recently, his son is scheduled to work in Singapore, and he has asked me to come to Singapore with him. He said he found me a very nice luxury apartment for seniors. Two elderly men went out for a walk. Julie came to check out the bodies. She came to process the checkout of the bodies, but something felt off. She sensed there was an issue with his daughter, but she didn't know what exactly. The biggest issue might be that her daughter is clearly earning a very low income as a community college administrator. She is working as a community college administrator with a very low income. However, the moment she reached out, she sent a Rolex to the body. America worships consumerism. Even if this is excessive, prepare to investigate the identity of the body named Emily. The body doesn't know it's close to being exposed. Perfect, he likes basketball. So he took him to the game. The two elderly men had a great time. However, one elderly woman stopped Julie and said something important got mixed up. Julie immediately became interested. The elderly woman who just entered claimed she lost a limited edition diamond. Julie took out the diamond necklace and realized this elderly woman understood that she was being mocked. Who would leave so much money and go after this person's fake necklace? The elderly woman had no choice but to admit she was lying, but she had this book and had no other means than to use it. She had been urging Diddy for security enhancements for some time, but Diddy wasn't paying attention. At such a time, Julie suddenly had an epiphany. It seems Diddy has been investigating the reason everywhere. She realized he was the thief, just as she was about to leave. At that moment, two women who were about to depart were caught by Diddy. They felt they had solved a major incident. Diddy persistently questioned them and furthermore called Emily, Sackley's real daughter, trying to expose Julie's fake identity. Fortunately, Emily had spoken to her father beforehand and Julie was able to send Diddy away due to her great enthusiasm. She immediately requested Sackley to leave the senior living community, but now she couldn't get in touch with Sackley at all because Sackley was out and about with Kumbak. The two old men, despite meeting for the first time, were chatting as if they were longtime friends. Later that night, Kumbak's son found them out, and he was very dissatisfied with his father roaming around. He felt that his father was not safe at all, having not cared for him for a long time. The father knew that he hadn't been interested in his dad for a long time. I was very busy, and Kumbak grew angrier the more they talked, absolutely refusing to accept his son moving away. He wanted to stay here because this is his own life. Sackley realized, upon hearing this, that Kumbak considered him a friend. He understood that Kumbak. How can I tell the two elderly men that I will be going soon? Julie returned to the retirement home and gathered belongings for Sackley. She became angry and entered with the document, which had the date when Julie and Emily visited the retirement home together. She saw the two Emilys and thought both were con artists, so I warned her and her cousin. This innocent and kind man is probably being deceived by both of them. Sackley hurriedly said no. In fact, he and Julie were a team investigating Helen's theft case. Everyone is misunderstanding. I know the truth. The truth is very simple. Nothing was stolen from the retirement home. However, the one who actually stole Mrs. Helen's belongings was the elderly woman with dementia, Greta. She thought Mrs. Helen's necklace was one of her props and took it away. Guided by this, they went to meet Greta. I went there and, as expected, Greta naturally pulled out her props. Yes, this is exactly what I was looking for, but can you lend it to me for a bit? Sackley realized the truth when Greta was moved to the special care room. Because of that, he noticed there hadn't been any thefts in the nursing home anymore. The watch was also taken by Greta, and at that time she was sick. Therefore, she mistakenly took Elliot's watch, and upon returning it, she returned the watch, but she couldn't remember where she got it from. She didn't remember this, and at that moment, her daughter sent a Rolex to Sackley. She saw it and thought that the watch belonged to Sackley, so she quietly opened Sackley's room door to return the watch. It was all a misunderstanding, and the incident was over. The elderly residents of the nursing home still didn't know. Meanwhile, Kumbak found the book that Sackley wrote and brought it to get a signature. Sackley wanted to tell Kumbak the truth before moving. He wanted to talk to Kumbak about his experience in the nursing home. He confessed that he had infiltrated to search for Helen's lost necklace, however. After a while, he truly began to think of Kumbak as a friend. They were still able to continue having lunch and dinner together as friends. He just has to move. Everything is a safe deception to fool me. This is false. Emily helped Sackley clear out her belongings at her house. She found her mother's belongings in the garage while helping, but what she realized was that the candy wrappers found there were ones her mother had wrapped by hand before she passed away. This meant that these items had been cleared away after her mother passed away and not left there. It means that her belongings were already cleared away when her mother was alive and placed there. In other words, it means that her belongings had already been cleared away while her mother was alive. Sackley ultimately confessed to his daughter that his wife had dementia before she passed away. At first, she was still coherent, but then her condition gradually worsened. She was still stable at first, but her condition gradually deteriorated after that. Seeing it worsen, the house was no longer safe for her. He could only contact the care center to admit his wife into a special room. Couldn't. However, the day before he was to go to the senior living community, his wife suddenly passed away. Sackley was unable to keep his promise to his wife. I promised never to let her enter the special care room, but in the end, she went there. In the end, she left that place, but he could never let go of that. He was suffering without relief. My father loved my mother wholeheartedly and did his best. Facing his daughter's comfort, Sackley finally relieved his heart's burden a little. Everything became clear, but the director of the senior living community, Diddy, wanted to clarify this to Sackley, so he hurriedly took Julie to meet Diddy. Anyway, Diddy is truly a good person and a very good director for all the seniors. If she leaves, what will happen when the next lonely person comes in? Diddy was moved and agreed to continue working. The senior living community welcomed big news. It was that Elliot and Virginia were going to get married. Kumbach still holds a grudge against Sackley for being betrayed by him, feeling that he tried to expose Diddy. However, Diddy actually convinced Sackley to stay with her. Additionally, Sackley really feels that Kumbach, who thought he was a friend, heard these words and forgot all his grudge. The next day he went to the university to look for Sackley, and the two became best friends again. Kumbach sometimes left the senior living community to hang out with Sackley. Sackley would occasionally visit the senior living community to see everyone. I will visit.